Welcome back, you Scrub Lords, and today we're going to be discussing the ZSU-23-4 Shilka, named so after the river in Russia. And today's going to be another episode of Devblog Chats. So, for those of you who are not aware, the ZSU-23-4 is going to be the new Tier 5 SPAAG vehicle for the Soviet lineup. And it's going to feature 4 23mm autocannons in a specifically designed turret mount, firing around 3,400 rounds a minute. So like usual, let's dip into this vehicle's history and give you guys a short rundown of what you can expect of this vehicle when it comes to War Thunder. So dipping into the history here, the ZSU-23-4 was developed out of a need for the Soviets to further protect their armored regiments as they advanced forward into NATO territory, if that time ever came. The Soviet Eastern Bloc always had a healthy respect for the NATO Air Force, and they needed something that could effectively engage and destroy fast-moving, low-flying jet aircraft. So development started of the vehicle in the late 1950s, however, it did not see service until 1965. Which was a fairly long development cycle. In any case, once the vehicle was in service, the Soviets now had a relatively mobile, hard-hitting, and relatively accurate mobile anti-aircraft system that could effectively protect their vehicles on the move. This vehicle was meant to not only fire stationary, but also on the move with tanks. This weapon system would become one of the most lethal anti-aircraft systems ever developed, and is still widely used in service today with several dozen countries, with over 6,000 units being made. It had an operating range of about 500 kilometers, and could reach a top speed of about 30 miles per hour, aka 50 kilometers per hour. It used the exact same chassis system as the ASU-85, which was based off of the PT-76. The modern radar equipment that was installed on the rear of the Shilka's turret allowed it to effectively engage air targets at heights between 100 and 1,500 meters, at ranges between 200 and 2,500 meters, and flying at speeds greater than 1,600 kilometers per hour. So in other words, it could shoot stuff flying very, very fast. This vehicle had a long and very, very successful service history. It's still in service with many, many countries today, and there is plenty of footage out there of these things being used in the events going on in Syria. This vehicle has a crew of 4, a driver, commander, gunner, and radar operator. The amount of ammunition carried in the vehicle is around 2,000 rounds. They were carried in generally around 50 round belts, with 420 for the lower guns and 580 for the upper guns. Despite the guns being water-cooled, it was encouraged that the crews only fire 2 to 10 round bursts per gun, so you had anywhere from, let's say, 8 to 40 rounds coming out of this weapon per salvo. Now, if you could hit the enemy aircraft that you were firing at, fantastic. But if you couldn't, you probably made the pilot very, very nervous and very, very scared, and he will probably miss the target anyway. And if the ZSU has caused the pilot to miss the target out of fear of being shot down, the ZSU has done its job. It has performed its role as an area denial weapon. You're going to be able to put a lot of rounds into the air with this weapon very, very quickly, and it's going to scare the crap out of Tier 5 jet pilots who are looking to get in some easy ground kills, which they've been used to getting. With this new patch, when you've got vehicles like the M163 Vulcan coming out, and this vehicle, it's going to be very, very, very dangerous place to be over the AO at low altitude with these new vehicles around. These vehicles were especially well used during the Afghan-Israeli wars, where the SA-6 missile systems would force Israeli aircraft low to the ground and into Shilka's operating envelope, where it could effectively engage and shoot down many of the Israeli Air Force jets. It was also deemed to be a very, very, very successful ground support weapon, and there was an Afghan modification of the vehicle which had the radar removed, and it was used purely in the ground support role. As the vehicle had a very, very high elevation, there was very few high buildings high ridges or cliffs that the Shilka couldn't properly engage with its quad-barreled 23mm cannons. The vehicle has gone on to prove her worth, seeing extensive action during the War of Attrition, 1968 to 1970, the Yom Kippur War, 1973, the Vietnam War, the Lebanese Civil War, the Angolan Civil War, the Western Sahara War, the Libyan-Egyptian War, the Ogaden War, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and subsequent war, the Iran-Iraq War, the Lebanon War, the Gulf War, the Georgian War, the First Chechnyan War, and the Second Chechnyan War, and finally the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and the South Ossetia War. There's also the events going on in Syria as well. If that doesn't properly demonstrate how wildly successful this vehicle is, I don't know what will. I mean, the ZSU-23-4 is probably considered to be one of the greatest mobile anti-aircraft systems in history. I mean, this thing is legendary. However, it does have a couple of drawbacks. Its main drawback, though, is its severe lack of armor. This thing has anywhere from 9 to 15 millimeters of armor. That's not even enough to stop 50 cals. So, despite its inherent advantages and being able to put out withering levels of fire, this thing is extremely vulnerable to anything that's above rifle caliber. This vehicle is going to be able to field both armor-piercing and high-explosive ammunition. Generally, there is a mix of both within the ammunition belts, and this would provide them with the capability to engage multiple different types of targets whenever they were deployed. As for their usefulness in War Thunder, this is very, very sorely needed by most nations, especially the Russians, because up until this point, the Russians have really lacked in the anti-aircraft department. The ZSU-57-2 is effective at engaging lightly armored tanks and soft-skinned vehicles, but lacks severely in the anti-aircraft department. This is due to the very, very, very low rate of fire, and the fact that its ammunition capacity is limited with only about 300 rounds of 57mm ammunition. It was also limited by its optical tracking system and lack of a radar. All of these factors combined made the ZSU-57-2 a less than effective anti-aircraft vehicle, and it wasn't the sort of thing that the Russians needed if they were going to be going over to the offensive. In a game sense, though, I don't feel that the ZSU-23-4 is going to make as much of an impression as the ZSU-57-2 already has. The ZSU-57's main principal strength is the fact that it can be used as a rapid-fire, highly mobile medium tank if need be, whereas the ZSU-23 is probably going to be a little bit less mobile, and it's going to have significantly less effective armament versus ground vehicles. But in the long run, the ZSU-23 isn't necessarily as good at taking on tanks. It wasn't meant to be taking on tanks. Neither was the ZSU-57, but the ZSU-57 is just better equipped to do so. The ZSU-23 is going to be meant specifically for those people who want to knock jets out of the sky and want to potentially deal with maybe a Leopard spam. But however, you're not going to be able to kill a Leopard head-on with this vehicle. You're going to have to pull some sneaky-breaky tactics in order to get around the flanks of Leopards if you want to use this vehicle in a ground support role. As for battle rating placement, my best guess would be the minimum would be 7.7, max 8.3. I doubt they're going to put it at 8.3. The best guess would be 8.0, to be honest. I don't anticipate it being put too low, because if you put it too low, then it's going to be thrown into 6.7 games, and it's going to utterly Shrek in 6.7 games against prop aircraft. It's also, I mean, granted, this thing was designed to shoot down low-flying jets, and when you're bringing in Dornier 217s, and one of these things is sitting on the battlefield, yeah, you're not getting away from that. I don't care how good of a pilot you are. And that's going to wrap up my conclusions on the ZSU-23-4 Shilka, a brand new Tier 5 SPAA coming to War Thunder. Keep your tracks checked and keep your binoculars in place, and I will see you guys in the next video.